How to make great mead at home. When I first started making mead, I made traditional mead batches. I hated every single one. They were sharp, thin, and unbalanced. Even with the best honey, I nearly gave up. But before I tell you what finally changed everything, take a second to like this video and subscribe. It really helps me keep sharing mead making lessons with the community. Now let's jump in. It wasn't one fix, it was actually three. Sweetness, tannin, and acid. Get those in balance and everything changes. At least for me it did. This is my exact recipe and method, using what I call the balanced core. We're making a 5-gallon batch targeting the original gravity of 1120 and finishing around 1020. That gives us a rich, full-bodied mead with a smooth, drinkable sweetness. We start with 17 pounds of honey. I like orange blossom honey. It's floral, fruity, and consistently great for traditional meads. I add spring or RO water, usually RO water, until the total volume reaches exactly 5 gallons. That usually means starting with about 3.5 to 3.75 gallons of water, then topping it off after the honey is fully stirred in. Yeast and Go-Ferm Rehydration comes next. For yeast, I use Lutra-Kavik, 11 grams or 1 full packet. But I always rehydrate it properly to protect those cells in a high gravity must. To do that, I combine 13.75 grams of Go-Ferm with 275 millimeters of clean water heated to around 110 degrees. Usually at 104, 105, but it could take up to 110 degrees Fahrenheit. Let it cool slightly, then gently stir in your yeast. Let it rest for 15-20 minutes before pitching. Because yeast needs fuel, especially in a high gravity must, for this 5-gallon batch, I'm using Fermaid only. I follow the TOSNA 2.0 schedule. Here's the math. You need 1.25 grams of Fermaid per gallon of must. So for 5 gallons, that's 6.25 grams total. Now don't add it all at once. Instead, divide that amount evenly into 4 staggered doses across the first 3 days of fermentation. That works out to exactly 1.56 grams per addition. The first dose is at pitch. The second dose is about 24 hours later. The third dose about 48 hours, and the final dose about 72 hours. This could vary depending on the gravities. I always take a gravity check prior to adding a dose. I recommend using a digital scale that reads to the 100th of a gram so that you can measure each addition precisely. If your fermentation is especially vigorous or your pH starts to drift, you can add the 5th dose around the 1/3 sugar break when gravity is roughly 1080. For that I use 1 to 1.5 grams of Fermaid as a final boost. This staggered approach helps avoid yeast stress, keeps your fermentation clean, and improves flavor stability down the line. Now let's talk pH, because it matters more than most people realize. At pitch, your pH should be above 3.5. If it drops below 3.2 in the first few days, fermentation can stall or even crash. So I check pH daily during those first 3 to 4 days. If it dips too low, I adjust using potassium bicarbonate, just a small amount to bring it back into the ideal range of 3.4 to 3.7. Tannin and acid aren't required, but they help a lot with balance, especially at the higher alcohol levels. I add 8 grams of red wine tannin in primary to improve mouthfeel and give the mead structure. For acidity, I use 4 grams of malic acid and 2 grams of citric acid. Malic acid gives a smooth, rounded tang like apples. Citric brings everything up with a fresh pop. You can skip these or adjust these in secondary after tasting, but I've found that these baseline amounts work really well in this recipe. Before pitching your yeast, remember to whip in plenty of oxygen. This helps the yeast build strong, healthy cells early on. Then I seal the fermenter with a silicone airlock, or if you use pressure fermentation, use a spunding valve. For pressure fermentation, I recommend start at 1 psi for the first 4 days, then raise it up 1 psi each of the next days until you reach 8 psi total, and hold it there till fermentation finishes. Fermentation usually wraps up in 2 to 3 weeks, and that mead will begin clearing naturally if nutrient and pH levels stayed in check. If you followed everything closely, you'll end up with a beautifully balanced mead. OG 1120, FG 1020, alcohol around 13 to 13.5% ABV. Tannin gives it a grip, acid gives it a fresh sweetness, and rounds it out perfectly. It drinks soft, structured, and complete, even within the first few months. So let's recap everything. 17 pounds of honey, water to 5 gallons, total must volume, 11 grams of Lutra-Kavik, rehydrated with 13.75 grams of Go-Ferm, plus 275 milliliters of water at 110 degrees Fahrenheit. I use 6.25 grams of Fermaid added in 4 stages, 1.56 grams at 24, 48, and 72 hours, and then again later on at around 1080 if necessary. Optional 8 grams of red wine tannin, 4 grams of malic acid, 2 grams of citric acid. For pressure fermentation, I start low at 1 psi and finish at 5 to 8 psi. Finishing gravity is 1020. If you found this information valuable, please like and subscribe to the channel. It helps me bring more content to the mead making community. Thanks for watching, and make a mead you actually are proud to share. For more videos on the subject, click one of these videos over here or my playlist. Happy mead making.